Now let's move on to our discussion. And today we are on Mission Impossible 3. So if you've been with us, you know that leading up until the July release of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, we are revisiting every movie in the Mission Impossible franchise. And so now we are on Mission Impossible 3. And we got a lot of good stuff here. To start out with Mission Impossible 3, I will give you the basic stats on Mission Impossible 3. And then I'll do some background. We'll do a basic plot summary. We'll start talking about our observations, strengths, weaknesses, all that good stuff. So first off, Mission Impossible 3. And as I didn't pull up the release date, this is great. Okay. So release date on Mission Impossible 3 was May 5th, 2006. So if you notice, if you follow for Mission Impossible 2, that is 6 years after Mission Impossible 2. So we had quite a gap between Mission Impossible 2 and 3, and there's a good reason for that. It debuted, like I said, May 5th, 2006. It had an estimated budget of about $150 million. It's a little bit fuzzy on that. But its opening release on its opening weekend did $47.7 million. It did $134 million domestically, and globally it did $398.4 million. So it was still a big movie. It is still the least amount of money that any of the Mission Impossible movies have made. This movie was delivered on time and on budget by director J.J. Abrams, which is our next thing, which we can get to later. But directed by J.J. Abrams. The writers for this one are... No, I just lost my place. The writers for this, J.J. Abrams was involved in writing. Alex Kurtzman and Orky and Kurtzman, who worked with Bad Robot for a number of years. Abrams obviously was famous for originally for the TV side of things, Alias and Lost. He was in the middle of Lost when he got this role. This was actually J.J. Abrams' first movie. Of course, he has since gone on to do the Star Trek trilogy. The Star Trek trilogy, the latest one, and then helm the latest sequels to the Star Wars franchise, in which he directed 2 of those 3 movies. The main cast in this one, you have Tom Cruise returning as Ethan Hunt. You have Michelle Monaghan, Ving Rhames, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Billy Crudup, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Kerry Russell, Maggie Q, Simon Pegg, and Lawrence Fishburne were your main actors for this one. The basic plot summary is IMF agent Ethan Hunt comes into conflict with a dangerous and sadistic arms dealer who threatens his life and his fiancée in response. All right. So on the background on some of this stuff, some of the reasons why this movie had issues and why it took so long to get off is you had a number of directors come in and come out over a series of years. They had issues trying to figure out what they wanted to do with the production. They actually even started on a script. They started on a production. They actually had scouted locations, had hired location teams. They had actors on board, including Scarlett Johansson, Kenneth Branagh, and Carrie-Anne Moss were all originally in the cast of Mission Impossible 3. And they were in Berlin and had gotten permission to shoot in Berlin and had a whole bunch of things. And then it all broke down. It broke down script-wise. They couldn't make it work. Directors came and directors left. They were rewriting the script, and then they had no director. So finally, in 2004, late one night, Tom Cruise started binging Alias. And after binging Alias, he got in contact with J.J. Abrams and decided to give J.J. Abrams a call. And Abrams was interested in the project, started working on it, and then had to leave because he had responsibilities in Lost. So they had to put off production of the movie while he was working on Lost and had some of his initial responsibilities for Lost. Eventually, Abrams comes in, and Abrams, because of his TV background, was able to have create the smoothest production schedule of any of the Mission Impossible movies. They stuck very closely to the script, and he delivered it, like I said, in time and under budget. Which, as a side note, that was a thing Christopher Nolan learned early in his career. Is I can do whatever I want if I come in on time and under budget.
Yeah.
They'll let me alone. The studios will let me know alone. So that's the background of this movie. They ended up when they were rewriting the script, they're like, I know we have these actors on board, but that just seems disingenuous to then write a new script based on the actors that we have rather than just seeing where the story goes and then recasting. So they ended up having to let all the actors that they had in place go. And so none of those three in particular were ever in any of the movies after that. It would have been fascinating to see what Scarlett Johansson in a Mission Impossible movie, but it didn't come to be. So now let's get to the movie itself. What did you observe about the movie? What were your observations as you watched? And we'll do strengths and weaknesses then, and memorable scenes and stuff later.
I would say, and I said this to you after watching it, this is a very high perspective of what happened, like a bird's eye view of everything. It's just a very well driven, tight action movie. And I think more so than the first two. It just seems like there's not really any downtime. Everything has a purpose. There's an impetus behind things. There's momentum behind things. It feels stylistically like a modern movie in a way that the first two at times struggled to feel that way. And I just think cinematography is up to par. It feels like a Mission Impossible movie. Now that's, it's not to say that there's nothing good about the first two, but, and we talked briefly about this too, because I also ended up watching Ghost Protocol,
which we'll get to in a couple of weeks.
That the series really starts to find its feel here. And for whatever reason, whatever you want to say, whether it's J.J. Abrams or whatever, this movie feels like Mission Impossible to me in a way that's a little bit different than the first two, especially the second one.
Yeah.
But even different than the first one.
Yeah, I would say the main thing to take away from this movie is that it reestablished the foundation for the series and allowed everything that comes after it to succeed as wildly as it did. The last three movies and where the franchise is now would not have been possible without this movie, because the back and forth nature of how the first two movies went, where the series was after Mission Impossible 2, they needed a stabilizing agent. And so what J.J. Abrams delivered was a kind of a classic Mission Impossible, classic spy action movie. There's some make the case that it's almost a little too generic, and I get that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get the strengths and weaknesses. But what it did is it said, okay, here's the baseline, here's the foundation, here's the things we want to focus on. And that allowed them to take off from that point. So I think this is really one of the critical moments in the entire franchise, was this movie, that it succeeded well enough. Now, at the time, because they were a little disappointed with the box office results, there were even some question marks whether Tom Cruise was getting past his prime, which is so funny to think about now.
Is Tom Cruise past his prime yet?
But there were actual questions about that. So in terms of the movie itself, this one had a much more personal feel. Abrams intentionally wanted to show Ethan's personal life. This is the only movie where we really get a deep sense of personal life from Ethan, the character, because it starts out, he's a teacher, as opposed to a field agent. He's getting engaged. They're having their graduation party. They're there at home with friends and family and all that type of stuff. And the story is very personal because then his trainee first, his trainee gets captured and he has to go after her. Then his fiance gets threatened. So it is a much more personal story than what we've seen from any of the other Mission Impossibles. Another thing, we also get background on the mission on the IMF. You actually see them in IMF headquarters for the first time, as opposed to just being out in the field the whole time. So you get a deeper sense of the Mission Impossible headquarters, including the one scene where they come up and they find out they're in the basement in the DMV, which is where IMF headquarters is located, which is kind of cool. Interesting thing about how the plot ended up being structured. There's the big like rabbit's foot that they're all trying to get, but the rabbit's foot is actually not really where the main mission is. The main mission is kind of, as the story plays out, is the grabbing of Owen Davian, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. And one of the other things that I observed in this one is there are massive similarities. I don't know if you saw this because you just watched Ghost Protocol, and we'll get to that a little bit more. Maybe we can get into this a little bit more when we talk about Ghost Protocol. But the similarities between the Vatican break-in and the Kremlin break-in are pretty interesting between those two movies. I like them. They reminded me of each other as we were looking at it. One of the main things that people talked about this in the lead up was how much of a connection this was with Alias. And so there was a lot of things that people were saying, like, this is basically just a movie version of Alias. and there are a lot of connections. There are actors from Alias in this one. There are writers from Alias in this one. The plot of a secret agent threatening someone's family. The Doomsday Trinket. The Berlin set at the beginning of the movie was actually the same set they used for the pilot of Alias. So there was a ton of Alias connections to this, and some people liked that and some people didn't. Abrams, for his thing, didn't deny it. He's like, there's always stuff we wanted to do on Alias that we didn't have the time or the budget to make. So he's kind of like, so we did some of that here, including the Vatican scene. Any other observations from you on a general standpoint?
So just like generally what I said is from like a bird's eye perspective.
Yeah.
And you said some people kind of view as generic. I think the more appropriate word, when you look at where the series went from here, where you look at where a lot of action films went from here, in a lot of ways, I think this movie is like like a modern action movie template.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Maybe the reason why people call it generic is because so many movies after it followed the same pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so let's get to strengths and weaknesses. What did you like about this movie? What worked for you?
I mean, it starts for me with Philip Seymour Hoffman because the guy's just he was an incredible actor. And this is not the kind of movie that you would expect to see him in. I don't think
it's actually, as he said, I've always wanted to do an action movie, and so this was kind of the first time he'd ever really did one.
Yes,
and it was right near the end of his life too.
Yeah, so he brought he brought instant gravitas to this movie. It has a weight with him in it that it would probably not have with almost anyone else.
Yeah, he was truly psychopathic. Like he embodied that psychopathic arms dealer, nefarious bad guy. And he was kind of a true focal point bad guy. Sometimes, like, this is one thing I would say that the Mission Impossible 2 lacked, is the bad guy was kind of cartoonish almost. This one, not. I mean, the bad guy, Philip Seymour Hoffman, was very, very believable as Owen Davian, and was definitely a true focal point nemesis. What else do you like?
I like the introduction of Benji.
Yes. Yes, we get Simon Pegg for the first time.
He's gonna have a bigger and bigger role the more you go on in the series, but I think in this movie you more so see him. There are a couple aspects where he's introduced. One, as the tech guy who's going to get everything figured out, but he's also introduced, I think, as a constant, steady comic relief, which is one of the things that I think led to the huge success of the series from here on.
Yes.
And that's why I say like this one felt like a Mission Impossible movie
Mhm.
because it had more of that. Now there are some slight moments in the first two where there's like a little humor, but this is intently focused humor.
Yeah, and there wasn't even
Behind that
that much of
character.
it,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, you saw it right with Simon Pegg. Like he goes on this long, like scary rant, and then closes with a joke, and just that
Mhm.
little bit really hints at it, and so as to where you could go from there. Yeah, no, I agree. That's a good one.
How about you?
Um, I like while I don't think he was overall a memorable character, some of Lawrence Fishburne's individual scenes were really good. Right at the beginning, like his booming voice, his presence, his opening monologue, where he just starts ranting at Ethan, ranting at Billy Crudup's character, including featuring the line. It's one of my favorite quotes from the movie. "Stop talking while I'm asking rhetorical questions." Uh, so it was just a great introduction to a character. Now they didn't do a ton with him, and um, he ends up only playing a semi-important role in the film. But I thought that opening scene was really good. I also like the dialogue with Luther. I'll get to this with weaknesses. Some of the side characters I thought were kind of weaknesses in this one,
Mhm.
but the dialogue, especially around the idea of Ethan getting married, between Ethan and Luther, was really good. I mean, it was best friend probing your motives type thinking. So I thought that dialogue was really good. Um, I also liked how they kind of corrected the overuse of the masks in two
Mhm.
by giving you a very granular, detailed idea of how they used the masks, how they created the voices. So they went right to the native level on that one,
Yeah.
showing you that. So I think that was a direct correction from what went wrong a little bit on two.
And I like that there was that scene where they were actually having some difficulty and struggling to get the mask and the voice and everything
Mhm.
completely sorted out. That it
Yeah.
wasn't just like because in the second one it kind of just felt like, oh, done. Like there was no behind the scenes of like, how are we doing this? Why does this work?
Yeah.
How is this believable?
Yes.
But in this movie, they did a great job of making that
Mhm.
reality.
So I have to ask you this. Is this one on your strengths? Is this one on your weaknesses? The sideways car explosion, where the bomb explodes on the bridge, or
Uh
the
huh.
the missile hits and explodes on the bridge. He goes flying and flies sideways into the car. It's one of the focal point moments of the movie. Are you fan? Or are you not a fan? Where you fall down on the sideways car hit?
I mean, I'm a fan of the impossibility of it all, but that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, I wouldn't quite put it on the level of Fast and the Furious sending a car to space on the back of a rocket, but
With
it
literally
is,
makeshift spacesuits.
it is trending in that direction.
All right. I also, last thing, I just did like the emotional human connection and the romance element of it was pretty good in this one. Um, Maybe not as strong as I thought it was in two. One of the strengths of two, I think, was the romantic connection, but it was good here. I really liked that. Well, I'll get to that later when we talk weaknesses. What did you think? What didn't work as well for you about the movie?
Uh, Trying to think because I really like this movie quite a bit.
Mhm.
I do think they kind of glossed over the connection between Ethan and his protege, who was the one
Mhm.
played by Kerry Russell, who ended
Yes.
up getting the bomb implanted in her head at the beginning of the movie, and who they're sent to rescue. Because it felt like they were telling you to feel like you should be feeling super emotional about this, but they didn't really give you a lot of background
Yeah.
other than like some flashback
Mhm.
scenes. So to me, it didn't really resonate.
Mm.
But then again, like you're not gonna have time to do that in a movie like this.
Yeah.
So I don't really I guess that's more a personal preference than necessarily a weakness, but I did feel that
Mhm.
watching the movie that there wasn't really a lot there for me to be invested emotionally in that character and story.
Yeah. Um, the first thing that I thought didn't work for me was the whole rabbit's foot concept. They do zero idea telling you what it is, how it is. Like they do some brief speculations. It's kind of just a plot device. Uh, this is the thing we're all going after. They don't tell you what it is. They barely mention it. It doesn't have the item itself doesn't really have any impact. Like you're not afraid of it. You don't know what it is. Like it's just this nebulous concept, and it's left as a nebulous concept through the entire movie. In addition, they don't even show you. It's so nebulous that they don't even show him stealing it. Like the Mission Impossible movies are all about the crazy stuff he does to like steal objects or to break into places. Like they don't even show you they don't even show you his actual theft of it.
Mhm.
They show you him getting onto the building, but that's it. Then they just cut to him having it. So that always kind of tweaks me a little bit. I mean, it's not a huge deal. I thought the team aspect didn't really work as well in this one. They gave John Rhys Meyers and Maggie Q very little to say and do, including like there's one scene where it's literally the two of them sitting there and they're trying to give these characters something, and they even interrupt that scene. So there's not a ton of connection there with the rest of his team. Of course, Luther is the exception, but there's already an established relationship there. So I just don't think that worked super well. Yeah.
Yeah, part of that problem is you've got some carryover, like you said, from the first couple, because they want to maintain a connection to those, but in the same way they're trying to build a bridge to what was going to come.
Yeah.
And you've got a character like Benji in there, and having him stuck kind of where he is does not lend itself the best to the role he's supposed to play.
Yeah.
And you see that in Ghost Protocol when we get to that he starts to move out of that and be a more active part of things.
Yeah.
And that's necessary for that dynamic to all work. It does kind of feel like a mismatch or mix up of two different paths, like divergent paths, which makes it hard to believe in the cohesiveness of their team.
Yeah. And in addition, it kind of left, because JJ wanted to focus on the personal life of Ethan in a way that literally none of the other movies do. It did kind of leave them with a little bit of a dilemma of what do you do with his wife? And you see them, it actually takes them several movies to figure out what to do with that, especially because they kind of wanted to go in a different direction. And so finally, once we get the fallout, they finally address that and deal with that. But it did kind of leave them in a sense of like, okay, we didn't really want to go in this direction with the movies. So it kind of left them with a little bit of a hanging chad there that they had to eventually come back around and deal with. And so for several movies, it was kind of hanging out there, like, what's really going on here? How is this working? Yeah. All right. Memorable scenes. So what sticks out to you?
One of the scenes that was memorable to me was very near the beginning of the movie when they first rescue. And what is Kerry Russell's character's name?
Now I'm gonna blank on it. I know it. It's I'll have to look it up.
Pretty sure it's not Felicity.
But not Felicity. No, it is not. I'm looking it up here. Kerry Russell's character name was Lindsay Ferris.
So when they rescue Lindsay and they're traveling through like the wind farm in the air like dogfight, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that felt unique,
especially being at night and just the use of light and color. And we saw some of the classic J.J. Abrams lens flare show up in that scene. It was funny because I saw that and I'm like, oh, J.J. Abrams, yep, there he is.
Yep, J.J. Abrams lens flare, gotta love it. The Rome break-in scene, the Vatican break-in scene was really that to me felt like the most classically Mission Impossible moment of it. Where the climbing over the staging, the accident outside, the climbing over the walls, the pretending to be a priest. You got another crew swimming in from the tunnels, and the running and switching clothing and all of that. It was a classic Mission Impossible scene. So it's one of my favorites in the movie. I think it's really like it ends up being like the focal point scene of the movie in terms of like what Mission Impossible action scenes are like. Like that's the one that most exemplifies it. Anything else? Memorable scenes.
Uh, just the beginning and end
Mm.
with the like bookmark,
Mhm.
the bookends of the
Yeah.
interrogation with Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Mhm.
I mean, and it was funny when you sent me that you were watching and you sent me a screenshot of that. Actually, is that at the beginning or the end?
Yeah.
And you do wonder when that's happening. Like, did they pull something on us at the beginning? Because movies will do that, where
Yeah.
they show you something in the beginning of the movie, but it turns out to not be what you thought it was at the end.
Yeah.
So there's that. As what I liked about that, how they use that device there, is as soon as that scene started again at the end, that thought immediately comes to your mind, like, "Oh, what's going to happen now? Like, where are they going with this?"
Yeah.
And it turns out that they did pull one overrun.
Yeah. And some people actually criticize that because all of them open with like a cold open that's like a major action scene at the cold open. And this one was actually, it's pulled footage from later in the movie. And some people didn't like it. They thought it was kind of a cop out. I thought it worked.
Yeah, I think it did a really good job of setting the stage for
Mhm.
the intrigue of the movie.
Yeah.
Because when you start with something that's when you start with such an emotional moment that is clearly a strong point in the movie between the two main characters, the protagonist Ethan Hunt and the
Yeah.
antagonist Philip Seymour Hoffman's character,
Mhm.
Davian. When you have that right at the beginning with no context, it immediately draws you in because you're like, I need to know what happened
Yeah.
here. What happened here? And then
Yeah.
they flash back, and you're like, oh my god, I have to wait 2 hours to figure out why we were here.
From an action standpoint, I also love the Shanghai swing.
Mhm.
That was a cool scene. So, doing the pendulum where he swings from one building to another. I like that. It was very good. It was very well shot. You got the big cityscape shot. It was really, really cool and really fun action scene. And the last one for me, and it was kind of a different moment, was on the rooftop of the hospital when Ethan knows he's leaving again and he's having that conversation with his wife. Was actually right before they get married, I think, where he's trying to decide what to tell her. Like she knows something's up. He knows that he can't keep just like, hey, I've got to travel for work. And he doesn't know what to tell her and he doesn't know how to tell her because he doesn't want to put her in harm's way, but he doesn't want to lie to her. So you can see that tension on their faces as they're acting out the scene, but they do it in such a loving and trusting way, which is unusual for that kind of scene. So I really like that. All right. Any other scenes, any other quotes, anything that you have for this one before we get to the last little bit?
I don't think so.
Okay. So fun facts. So fun facts and tidbits. Maggie Q actually learned to drive for this movie. She did not know how to drive before they put her in I think it was a Lamborghini, which apparently she hit a parked car. The bridge scene, which is supposed to be over the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. They did some overview shots of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, but they actually built this bridge in the middle of dry land.
Huh.
And all the water around it, it was all CGI going back in there. And you look at it, it's beautifully stitched. You cannot tell that is actually a dry land bridge, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. This shows how they're able to do so. The house that Ethan lives in was actually modeled off of J.J. Abrams' actual house. And the first time he walked on the set, he got a little freaked out because they basically just rebuilt his house on the set. The guards on the rooftop in the Shanghai scene are actually members of Jackie Chan's stunt team. So they hired Jackie Chan's stunt team to do some of that. And this was I think the funniest thing I've ever seen in the promotion. These movies are known for like crazy wild promotions and crazy parties to open it up. They did a promotion that got them in severe trouble. mailbox stations, like where you would like put the quarter in and pull the thing and get the mailbox.
Yeah.
They actually rigged mailbox stations with electronic devices, including ones that had wires hanging out, where when you opened it up, it like played the Mission Impossible theme or the Mission Impossible music. And they rigged like 100 of these things in like New York and LA.
Wow.
And they actually, several of them had to be detonated by the police department because people called in bomb threats for them. They didn't know what they were, and they actually got sued. Paramount got sued over this. So whoever the marketing person who came up with this idea, it didn't work so well. Yeah. There was one scene where I think it was the scene where Billy Crudup is talking with Ethan Hunt when he's laying on the table. Cruise was actually having to hold up cue cards for Billy Crudup because they literally wrote that scene like an hour before it was acted. They rewrote it, so he didn't have any of the lines memorized and was just having to read off the cue cards that Tom Cruise was holding up at the moment.
Well, that's funny.
Yeah. That's it. That's what I got. So that's our Mission Impossible 3 wrap up. Keep going to filmforfans.com. We'll have a write-up on all of these and some fun video things where we'll put the actual scenes that we liked in there as well. And we'll cut up this section from the podcast as well.